Vivek Sanal and myself, Murul Disa. And like we've already told you, it's time for Tally. They come in with their experts and their maestros come into the studio. And one such lady sitting right before me, her name is Fazeela Gopalani. She's the head of the Middle East for Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Fazeela is responsible for delivering ACCA's strategic vision and representing the interest of over 20,000 members and future members across the region. Now, she has, she comes with an experience of over 2 decades of experience in accounting and where finance is concerned. And I think the highlights for me is that she recently was recognized as one of Forbes Middle East top 100 most powerful businesswomen in 2023.
And that powerhouse is in our studio right now. Fazeela, pleasure to speak to you this morning. Good morning.
Pleasure to be here, and thank you ever so much for having me.
Right, so you're here to talk about an interesting subject called tax.
If we call that interesting, right?
Well, it's confused
We've been
a lot
living
of
in
us.
a tax-free country for so long.
Correct.
And now with the implementation of it, it's quite interesting to see the different people's reactions and organizations' reactions to this.
Right, and what are the kind of reactions that you are getting or you've been receiving in the market?
Well, some people are concerned that, now they had VAT, now they've got corporate tax. Will there ever be income tax? Because if there is, I don't know what country we'll all be going to flee to. However, I mean, corporate tax is completely a different ballgame, right? They had to do this. They had to implement it. The UAE did 4 organizations. But the reactions are mixed bag of feelings and reactions, I would say.
Right. Because as consumers or as the residents, you're thinking you're already paying VAT. Why corporate tax?
Yeah.
This is an added burden. Not realizing, obviously, it does have its pros. We're only focusing on the cons right now, but everything does have, a reason why it's being in place. So if you could just talk to us a little bit about that as to why do you think UAE has now shifted its gear where corporate tax is concerned?
I don't think the main reason is that the UAE introduced corporation tax was to comply with the OECD BEPS Pillar 2, which imposes a global minimum tax of 15%. Now, we're lucky. In the UAE, they've imposed a 9% tax for turnovers and profits above 375,000 dirhams. However, they had to do this in order to get into that international landscape of a level playing field. So it was inevitable. Even when VAT came out, it was just a matter of time for them to get onto this international landscape. And we are still lucky that it's only 9% here. I mean, if you look at other countries globally, their corporate tax rates are much, much higher.
Right. So you're saying, I mean, even though we're paying the tax, we're paying it at a bare minimum price.
Correct. Yeah. Which is lucky.
As entrepreneurs, you always try to evade paying things off. You always
It's called planning.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, or escaping even, which I know, the minds think alike, and any entrepreneur you talk to them, they'd be thinking of how do I save on even that 9%?
Yeah.
But not realizing that they would fall into a bigger mess if they do so.
So in the UK, I had an accounting practice, and I had a lot of entrepreneurs who kisi ko tax nahi bharna tha. Everybody used to come and say,
Because both high tha, isliye?
yeah, it was high. In the UK, it's very high.
Okay.
But what they used to say, ke nahi, thoda tax kam karo, and you can't do that. So there are 3 different things. There's tax planning, tax avoidance, and tax evasion. So tax planning is, doing a smart sort of restructure, thinking about your companies, your entities, what can you do to sort of plan to reduce your tax within legal means.
Right.
Tax avoidance is, for example, if you don't want to pay Salik, you were just talking about that before this, right?
You can take 3-1-1.
Yeah, so you take like Jumeirah Beach Road, you take Al Wasl Road to get to the same destination from this part of town to the other part of town.
Even though it's time consuming. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's avoidance, and that's legal. But tax evasion is illegal. You can end up in jail for it. Fines and penalties are huge. And so there's got to be a clear line between these, and entrepreneurs need to understand what are they doing, if it's tax evasion, avoidance, or they're basically tax planning. And I think we're now coming into this landscape here. I mean, many entrepreneurs and business people are from, India, or they're setting up from the UK, etc. And they've got to understand the difference and make sure that they comply to the rules and regulations, because the Federal Tax Authority can do audits at any time to organizations and review all their books and records, just like they could back in our home countries.
Right. But then again, this kind of process is already streamlined with, massive entities, right? Like huge companies or legacy-based companies. What happens to the small-time businesses? Are they going to be affected? Because they're never going to, one, they're not going to make that cut of 375, but yet now they have to start keeping their accounting books in place. So is this an added burden on them? Too much of an ask for them?
Yes, it is an added burden. However, it's a good added burden, because these small-time businesses aren't very good at filing their books and records or calculating what their profits are going to be. So at the end of the day, they need softwares like Tally that are going to support them, that will give them a P&L account to tell them how much profit they're making. And I think getting on the bandwagon for compliance and transparency is key for organizations here. Those days are long gone when you don't need an accountant, where you don't need an auditor. Because the regulations are going to get stricter as time does go on. And compliance is going to be at the heart of all of this, which makes the role of chartered accountants ever so important for the future landscape in the UAE.
And I'm sure the chartered accountants can also take help of technology as well, with AI really, taking over in terms if you have an AI accountant working for you in terms of Tally solutions, incorporating that. Your thoughts, Fazeela?
Oh, wow. So that is a conversation I absolutely love, because they all say that the role of accountants is going to become extinct, right? I'm from a family of accountants. My father was a chartered accountant. I'm a chartered accountant. My son doesn't even have a choice. Typical Indian family, has to run in the blood, right? You won't even have a choice to not be an accountant. Otherwise, I don't know what I'll do. So basically, people and being the head of an accounting body, I always get asked, like, why should we study 14 exam papers, 13 exam papers to become a chartered accountant? Because of artificial intelligence and robots. And that is true, actually, that robots are right now sitting, looking at a human being, doing a tax return that might take about 4 or 5 hours, and then the robot learns it all, and that robot's able to do a VAT return within 20 minutes.
Without errors.
Without
errors.
But they're going to need a human to be able to look at that, to check that everything is at par, right? So I don't think the role of accountants or tax professionals is going to become extinct. What I do believe it is that is going to change to more of reviewing rather than actually doing. And softwares like Tally are going to be really key and important for small, medium enterprises, larger enterprises. They've got to get to understand that having something like this is really important, instead of doing that whole paper pen sort of writing down what they're doing.
Correct.
Debit what comes and credit
Yeah,
what goes.
So
in a
all
notebook.
the monotonous work will be taken care by
Yes.
robots, is what do you feel?
Yeah, I really do feel that. Monotonous work such as stock takes. So for audits,
Correct, yeah.
back in the days, I would stand in a warehouse in the freezing cold,
And
counting
count, yeah.
कि कितना TVs hai, how many hi-fis they've got, all of that type of stuff. They don't do that now. Drones do that.
Nice.
They actually do like stock
Interesting.
takes. So the world of audit and technology in accounting and finance has really evolved and changed. But I don't think our role will become extinct. No, I just think, like when the ATM machine came out, right?
Right.
Sab soche ke, the ATM machine is coming, Dell ka kuch kaam nahi hoga, we won't need it anymore, everyone's losing their jobs. It actually wasn't true. Yes, you needed less tellers in banks, but you actually needed 3 more humans to support that ATM machine. Right? The security guard that comes and picks it up. So new jobs come about when technology evolves and changes.
And when your job actually, is replaced by technology, you become a little grumpy. We won't speak about that. We'll speak about corporate tax coming up. Right now, chota sa break. We'll be back.
Talk 100.3.
टैली सॉल्यूशंस एवरी मंडे एंड फ्राइडे 9 से 10 के बीच में आपको कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स के बारे में हम और भी बताते हैं विद आवर एक्सपर्ट्स। और हमारे एक्सपर्ट है फजीला गोपलानी एंड रिसेंटली उन्हें रिकॉग्नाइज किया है एज वन ऑफ द फोर्ब्स मिडिल ईस्ट टॉप 100 मोस्ट पावरफुल बिजनेस वुमेन in 2023. How long you've been in Dubai, Fazeela?
I've been here for 15 years. It's home. I never want to go back to the UK, to the freezing cold. UAE is home now.
Right, and you were talking to us at length about accountants and about their role in the incorporation of this corporate tax. Could you talk to me a little bit more about this?
So I think the role of accounting and finance professionals is going to be ever so important now that this landscape is changing, and that's because of the increased tax compliance requirements that are going to be expected. You've now got a big entity, the Federal Tax Authority, that is going to be key at coming and reviewing and auditing organizations' books and records in order to see that the right amount of tax is being paid. And so our role is more important now than it's ever been, especially in a country like the UAE where you've had the VAT implementation and now you've got corporate tax coming up.
And what are the benefits in terms of for the organizations that they could see when they implement corporate tax in their businesses?
So it depends on the size of the organizations. Obviously, huge, large organizations have systems, procedures, and processes. Small businesses don't. This is going to force their hand at improving their record keeping and improving keeping books and statements of accounts in order to actually see what they're making. You see, why do economies charge tax? They charge it for better infrastructure, for public services. And we know that the UAE is trying to diversify from the oil and gas reliance.
Right.
And this is another revenue stream similar to Salik and the money that you said that they're bringing in via that. This is exactly the same thing in order to support the economy.
How far are we away from income tax? Not too far.
Oh my goodness, it's the end of March already. It's April,
Year ending.
May, June. We're talking about the 1st of June 2023. That's not long. People have got to wake up and smell the coffee and get ready for this. This is what's concerning, is that when VAT came, people were lastminute.com. Organizations left it, aa raha hai, kal aayega, next month, 6 mahine mein. And before you know it, it's around the corner.
But that's a very desi approach, you know that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we push things until the last very minute until it's unavoidable and then we delve
But
into
again,
it.
there is a lot of time in terms of, आपका जो भी financial year है, उसके बाद 9 महीने बाद you have to file the returns, right?
Yeah, but you've still got to start getting the systems, procedures, education to your teams, your finance teams, but the company at large for them to understand. For example, you've got to change and have additional tax codes on whatever softwares that you're using to incorporate this. And that's not going to be done overnight. I mean, I know technology is amazing. You just press a button and things sort out.
Correct.
But there's a lot of work pre-planning. And if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, right? So the organizations need to understand how important it is.
So, what could possibly go wrong if companies or if entities do not plan in advance? What are we anticipating?
The largest issue, I would say, is that if FTA came and did an investigation, the fines and penalties for non-compliance, they're
They could be huge, yeah.
Like at some of them, I was at a seminar recently and a tax specialist was saying sometimes it's 350% of the tax. And now they're reducing that, and FTA are looking into that. But I mean, that's humongous types of fines and penalties. Can you imagine small entities? They would go bankrupt.
Absolutely.
They wouldn't be able to cope with it.
But I think they are banking on the relief part of it in inverted commas.
But
Yeah,
for the
They're
relief, you'll
liking
have to do
the
something.
part that there'll be some. In terms of maintaining books
Yeah.
of accounts, and there's where you mentioned the tally solutions come into play. As we speak, we got a message. What about inflation because of these taxes? In terms of because the corporates need to shell out more probably from their profit. You
Yeah.
think prices of products and things could increase, services?
For sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That's a natural thing that is going to happen. I'm so sorry to the audience, okay? I don't want to be bringing bleak, miserable news on a Monday morning. But isn't that natural thing that's going to happen? I mean, think about the economy, right? Corporate tax is coming in. At the end of the day, organizations are going to try to put it on the consumer. And then you've got inflation. So
I don't know what to say, Fazeela. I mean, we know day in and day out we try to talk about these subjects, and here you come in saying, you might have an increase in things. Okay, now let's
well,
talk.
then we have to get back to our organizations and ask for a salary increase, right?
That
And
way,
how easy would
that
that be?
way-
Would that be
no, no.
different? That's a debate for another day.
Yeah, that's a debate for another day.
What about ACCA? I mean, they as a body, how are they supporting, the accountants and the finance professionals in the industry? What are they doing to ensure that they are well educated, as in the front runners, like they like to call them?
Yeah. So ACCA is the global body of professional accountants from the UK. We've got around 20,000 students, members and affiliates in the Middle East, and we look after about 11 countries from the Middle East. Globally, we've got about 750,000 students, affiliates and members. Now, ACCA, for the first time ever, has developed a UAE specific tax certificate. And we've worked with the Ministry of Economy. So they requested us to work on a tax certificate with them.
Okay.
This is an online certificate that can be done by any accounting and finance professionals. Doesn't have to be an ACCA member. It's not very expensive. It's around £350. And it's a 20-hour online course that gives you a certificate from ACCA to say that you are up to date with all the tax knowledge. And that's not just of corporate tax. We're talking about VAT, transfer pricing, economic substance, the whole shebang.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
So to learn, you need to unlearn. Is that something that a lot of the professionals are going through at the moment? Is the framework that has been passed on to you? Is it more clear right now than what it was at the beginning of
Announcement
the
of it.
announcement? Yeah.
Yeah, so FTA had a consultation document which a lot of tax professionals reviewed and gave their feedback on. Then we're talking around November time. They released an updated document that had everything there. But it's the executive regulations and the decree law hasn't been released yet. So there are little nitty-gritty details. So we're saying 80% is set in stone. About 20% we're still pending for information on. But I think the key here is that the frameworks are very similar to the British, to the UK, to the Australian frameworks. Tax is tax at the end of the day. The nitty-gritty details are going to be a little bit different. So those who are accounting and finance professionals in the region that have either studied this in their qualification or have worked in different countries and that have the knowledge of application, it's your time to demonstrate to your organizations that you have the capability to support with this. Now you see many organizations are having roles such as head of tax.
Right.
Especially if multinational organizations already had to have that.
Correct.
But there are now big tax departments coming up, and that is a role for accounting and finance professionals to go place themselves in.
Right. The constant worry, I think, that most of the organizations are having is right now we're paying 9%, but will we see an increase in the future? Because this is like, you're just testing the waters. And once you know how deep it is, then you know where you need to dive or probably stone yourself, like you'd like to call it. Are we going to see an increase?
Never say never, right? I really wish I had a crystal ball. I don't want to make you any more miserable on a Monday morning. For now, the information I also have, it would be 9%, inshallah. God knows for how long. And then we'll have to just wait and see what happens.
वैसे बातें तो फजीला के साथ हम कर ही रहे हैं. If you want to know anything else, आपको कुछ और जानना है, you can always send us a WhatsApp 0586861003. Every Mondays and Fridays, Tally Solutions bring to you Tally Compliance. ये आप सुनते हैं on Talk 100.3.
Talk 100.3.
Welcome to Daybreak with Vivek Sanal and myself, Meerul Isa. Currently in conversation with Fazeela Gopalani, the head of the Middle East for the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, ACCA. Now, she is on the show talking to us at length about corporate tax and about things we need to bear in mind as entrepreneurs or even as residents as well. Before we could go on this break, Fazeela, we were talking about your collaboration with Tally. Could you talk to us a bit more about how ACCA has joined hands with Tally?
Yes, I can. So Tally is a key strategic partner for ACCA. Obviously, our accounting and finance professionals need to have an understanding and a know-how of softwares like this. We don't actually incorporate softwares within our qualification. But accounting and finance professionals leave our qualification and employers say, well, do you have an understanding of accounting softwares? And in some countries, they actually ask, do you use or know how to use Tally? So it's a key requirement for our students to be able to understand that not everything is done on Excel, that organizations need something like Tally in order to support them. And so they need to have an understanding of it. So we work very closely with Tally. We have for many years. We've got a big accounting conference that is coming up on the 21st of May, where Shashi Tharoor is coming from India to do the opening keynote and speak about, leadership lessons in the 21st century. And so we're working very closely with Tally there in order to support the accounting and finance professionals in the UAE.
Right. With the introduction of corporate tax, are we seeing any new opportunities where with the accounting industry is concerned?
Yes, new jobs, more jobs, right? So isn't that great news? Specialist skills and understanding will be required from employers, from their employees in the area of tax in order to ensure that their companies are complying with the rules and regulations out there. And that, just in case there is an audit and a review, that they have all their books and records maintained, that they're able to demonstrate and show. So there are, in my perspective and in ACCA's perspective, many opportunities for accounting professionals out there with the introduction and implementation of corporate tax.
But how important is for the accountants to be savvy, tech savvy as well? Is that a requirement?
I get asked this on so many panels. And you know what? I cannot, as an accountant, sit here and say, oh, I'm a dinosaur with technology. No, we need to become tech savvy, digitally savvy. I'm not saying we need to become coders or that we need to know Python and, things like this. But we can't just sit there doing double entry with a paper and a pen and using our calculators. We can't just be bean counters. We are going to have a more better understanding of the benefits that come out of technology in order to support us to do our role better as accounting and finance professionals.
But Fazeela, you're talking about the younger generation. What happens to the older lot, Because for them to go back, to understand, to rework on their skills, to become that tech savvy individual, it's extremely difficult for them. You can train a youngster, but training, somebody of the older person in the workforce is very difficult.
Yeah, trust me, I know. I have to ask my kids to download half the stuff and apps on my phone. And that's just the beginning of a laptop and computer issues. But we can't sit here and say that we can't learn. There's a saying in Arabic that says, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. And we have to have continuous learning. You see large organizations, small organizations, they're all going through digital transformation. And technology is changing the landscape of the way business is done, let alone a department such as the accounting and finance department. And therefore, as accounting professionals, we have to embrace this change. It is no longer a time for us to sit there and say, I can't learn this, I'm too old. We have to get on that bandwagon. Yes, we won't be as good as the younger generation, but we have to have a good understanding of how technology is going to support us.
Since the introduction of corporate tax, we got a message from Imtiaz. He's planning to move to UK now. He's asking what would be the cost for companies' registration in UK. For example, a cafeteria, restaurant, a small trading company, and what are the possible taxes?
Oh, wow. Lovely question. So, do you know the cost of setting up a company in the UK is absolutely nothing?
Zero.
compared to setting up here. Here it goes into
Same
the
in
thousands
India,
of
right?
pounds,
Yeah.
right? There literally you can set up a company about £150.
Really?
Yeah, a limited company. And even if you didn't want to be a limited company, you wanted to be a sole trader, that's ever so simple and easy. The corporation tax would obviously depend. If you're a sole trader, you pay income tax. If you're a corporation that's a limited company, and if you're setting up as a cafeteria, I would say do it as a sole trader, not as a limited company. And then we're talking, but the tax rates in the UK are high. Depending on your profits, it could go up to about 30%. So where's 9% and 30%?
Amazing. और भी कोई सवाल है तो आप फजीला से पूछ सकते हैं. We have another 30 minutes to go. 0586861003 Tally Solutions bring to you Talk Compliance on Talk 100.3. Good morning.
Talk 100.3.
डे ब्रेक चल रहा है. विवेक और म्यूरल आपके साथ एंड दिस आवर इज ब्रॉट टू यू बाय टैली सॉल्यूशंस. tallysolutions.com पे आप लॉग ऑन कर सकते हैं एंड यू विल गेट द बेस्ट अवेलेबल सॉल्यूशन. व्हाई सेटल फॉर गुड व्हेन यू कैन गेट द बेस्ट?
Absolutely, and right now we are in conversation with Fazeela Gopalani, who is the head of the Middle East for the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants in the UAE. We are talking to her at length about corporate tax and about its implications. We have a message that's just come in
So we
from her.
got a
right?
message from Kitty. फजीला वो जानना चाहते हैं कि कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स का रोल क्या होगा इन यूएई रियल एस्टेट एंड इफ देयर आर एनी गाइडलाइंस अवेलेबल.
I think you'll have to refer to FTA. They have lots of guidelines for different sorts of industries, and they'll be better equipped to be able to answer that. Second resort would be going to a tax consultant because they will have a better understanding on the different sort of industries, especially real estate, which could be a bit of a complicated one.
एंड ऑफ कोर्स बिकॉज 375,000 का थ्रेशोल्ड जो है वो रियल एस्टेट बहुत इजीली क्रॉस करता है हर महीने.
Right.
Yeah.
साल तो छोड़ ही दो, हर महीने.
So this is more applicable than a lot more to the real estate sector because they will be making that kind of money.
Oh yeah, for sure. Most organizations will be having profits of 375. Most organizations.
But why this threshold? Why 375? And where did this figure come about? Or the 9% figure? I mean,
You see, in order for them to comply, for the UAE to comply to the OECD BEPS Pillar 2, and that imposes a global minimum of 15%, right? The UAE government, and they did decide that they wanted this region to remain competitive, to attract businesses. So how can we start implementing this? And as you see, most countries, whenever they start implementing tax, they start with sort of lower thresholds.
Right.
Okay.
And then it is
So
to
this
be
is just the
seen.
start, yeah?
This is just the start. God knows what will happen in another 10 years' time.
I love it from the time Fazeela is in the studios. You know, she's giving us a little bit of hint.
ऐसे दिल दहलाने देने वाले अनाउंसमेंट्स कर रहे हैं फजीला.
I don't have a
Breaking
crystal
news.
ball. However,
फर्स्ट टाइम आपने
It's like
सुना.
reading between lines.
it's inevitable because they need to reduce the reliance on oil and gas, and this is a way to diversify. And all strong, built-up economies all have big and important tax regulations and tax. Revenue is important to drive the economy.
Right. Now, talking about Federal Tax Authority, the compliance required for companies, how will they be coping with that in terms of, aligning themselves with the guidelines and with the compliance?
So corporate tax is a self-assessment, which basically means that the onus and responsibility is on the organization to file their assessments.
Okay.
To make sure that they've got good, robust record-keeping systems and using softwares like Tally Prime. It is the onus of the organization to ensure that they've given training and education to the staff and their employees.
Right.
And that they are in having compliance monitoring. So they're checking the processes that they have and that they're using technology in order to support them. Then the FTA will come.
Okay.
If they come, to do a check and to do a review and an audit of all the books and records to see what they think. And if there have been any shortcomings there or any mistakes or anything that has been done, then there are obviously fines and penalties because of
But
that.
the first mistake will be
Maafed.
lenient.
You know?
Yeah, maafi mushkil.
Will there be any leniency on those lines?
That's difficult to say.
But then voluntarily, if you say that I might have made some mistakes.
Then you'll have to get a good tax consultant,
No?
good tax advisor. Could recommend a few.
Right. And in terms of companies, what do they need to update in terms of the procedures to comply to corporate tax?
Well, first of all, their systems and processes have to be able to adapt and incorporate corporate tax. For example, if they've got a software like Tally, they're going to have the tax codes, make sure that everybody in the organization understands the importance of tax. I mean, even if you go down to the, smaller shops and businesses and entrepreneurs, whether that's the tailor or the chai wala dukan, right? They've all had to start thinking when VAT came about charging VAT on every single transaction.
Correct.
Here, it's about getting all the paperwork in order to then be able to go calculate the profits and then be able to calculate the taxes. Now, a lot of people will say, "Oh, what if if I give myself a big salary, is that going to be allowed? What if meri biwi bhi kaam karti hai in the business, or my son? Can I give them a salary because it's tax deductible?
Correct.
And then that would reduce your profits." No, you can't do things like this because FTA obviously are going to check. They've the benchmark salary for an entrepreneur within that industry is 500,000 dirhams, say, and you're giving yourself 1,000,000 dirhams, then that's not at benchmark. So a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs start thinking in this way, ki biwi ko, beti ko, bacche ko dal denge, and they'll give
Because
them a
it's
salary.
family business.
Yeah.
Are there any reference points? We're talking about these salary brackets. I mean, where can I go and find these reference points? Because, my understanding of the business is pretty different. You could have say an oil and gas industry, right? I mean, two people working in the same field. One having a company for 1,000 employees, and another having a company about 50 employees. So the one who has the larger amount would obviously take a massive chunk and go back home, the CEO, in comparison to the other company. So where is the kind of comparison? What is the kind of comparison are we looking at, and where can I get those bracketed?
There are benchmark indices out there. I think number two, HR recruitment experts do have guidelines on information like this. And the accountants and tax professionals do have an idea because of the amount of different clients that they have of what is normal and what is extraordinary and over the top that is blatantly done to avoid and evade taxes.
और भी बातें right now on Talk 100.3. अगर आपके पास कोई सवाल for Fazeela, you can send us a WhatsApp 0586861003.
Talk 100.3.
Welcome to Daybreak with Vivek Sanal and myself, Murul Disa, and currently we are in conversation with Fazeela Gopalani, who's the head of the Middle East for the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Something that really caught my attention, Fazeela, when I was reading your profile was, you are basically behind the industry initiatives, including women in finance, and you are here to educate such women as well. I mean, kudos to you. Why was this mentioned at the end of your profile? This should be highlighted at the top.
I'm a chartered accountant by profession, and I'm really passionate about supporting women in finance. There are not enough of us out there, especially in this region. The percentages are so low. So first of all, it's about inspiring and motivating females to join this, historical male-dominated profession,
Right.
and
Finance.
to demonstrate, finance, and to demonstrate to them how exciting it can be, and how we are no longer just bean counters. But Women in Finance agenda is key to ACCA and what we're doing in the region in supporting women with developing themselves in their careers and supporting them with that sort of career progression into C-suite and board level rooms.
So with your consent, may I ask you this question? So is it a man's world? Is finance considered a man's world? Or have you managed to make a breakthrough for yourself and like-minded women as well?
It's not a man's world anymore. We're getting up there. As a British organisation, our male to female is 50% now.
Beautiful.
Globally. So that just shows things are changing, and going forward, that male-dominated stigma that's on the accounting and finance profession will change. More women are joining and embarking on a career.
And the change is happening. June 1st, 2023, corporate tax coming in. A lot of questions still unanswered for companies. In terms of maintaining books of accounts, I think everybody is well aware of. In terms of compliance, people are getting more aware of. But what are the more, in terms of preparations now the companies need to do according to you?
So first of all, they need to go and register with FTA.
Imara tax platform?
Yeah. So go register yourself, and that needs to be completed before the first tax return is due. Then it's about understanding how to comply and fill in and complete the tax returns that they have to do. Then it's about tax payment. How do they make the payment? What is the payment? Of course, behind all of that, we're talking about record keeping, making sure that their records and having something like Tally to support them. And if there is a audit, having all the books and records available. And then you've also got to be aware of any fines and penalties. So can you see how much there is around the whole education landscape of tax compliance?
Do you think this onus must be on the companies or individuals?
No, for sure, organizations, the employer, they need to equip employees with this skill set, or go out and hire experienced tax professionals who've done this in other countries or for other organizations. But this is the employer's responsibility, the organization's responsibility, that they have to get on top of this.
Right.
How busy are the accounting professionals as of now, and how busier will they get, according to you, Fazeela?
It is unreal, the amount of SMPs that are opening up in the UAE. When I say SMPs, that means small, medium practices.
Okay.
Already, post VAT, there was a big boom, right? Loads of firms, lots of business owners and tax professionals or accountants from India, etc., were coming here to set up their practices. And now it's even more so because of compliance with corporate tax. This is a great opportunity for people to set up firms here, because not everyone can afford the big tier or the mid-tier firms,
Right.
especially entrepreneurs and smaller businesses. But it's very key and important that these small, medium practices understand and are doing right by the rules and regulations of the UAE.
Correct. And that's where Tally Solutions, play a big part as well in terms of guiding you, because I think once you file your returns as well, in terms of the approval, it is FT approval, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Right. So when you're talking about, compliance, and you're talking about the corporate tax per se, what would you say to the companies who would be looking at updating their systems, or ones who would be looking at educating their staff? I mean, what is the way forward? Would we have to change the way they function, or their systems even? Like, for example, if, they can go ahead and purchase Tally even.
Yep. So, first of all, what accounting software do you use? Number two, do you have the tax codes in there applicable? And if not, you need to speak to your software provider. If you don't have a software and you're on old school Excel or notebooks, you need to go get something like Tally Prime in order to be able to support you with giving you instant information at your fingertips and start it off clearly from day one in order to ensure that you are complying. Education is key, as I've said earlier, continuous learning. So ensuring that employees are given the skill set to understand the UAE tax framework, and with all due respect, our ACCA UAE tax certificate, which can be done by yourself, 20 hours in your own time, self-paced learning online.
Wow.
Something like this is going to be key for employers to support their employees with having the skill set to understand the UAE tax system and regulation.
Right.
So how can people access it on the website?
Yeah, ACCA's website.
All right.
So we know that corporate tax is coming on from the 1st of June 2023. And for those who've missed the earlier half of our conversation, could you give us a recap as to what are those pointers that people need to bear in mind in run-up to the corporate tax?
Yes, so if you have got corporate profits of above 375,000 dirhams, you will be applicable to a corporate tax rate of 9% from 1st of June 2023. So it's important that companies understand what is the bottom line profit that they're making. Make sure that the tax deductions are in line with what are allowed to be allowable deductions, because normally in other jurisdictions you have a profit, you then go and add back expenses that are disallowed according to the tax authorities. So understanding how to do an accurate tax computation is going to be key here, and that you are deducting expenses that are allowed to be deducted and not putting in extra expenses and are not allowed to be deducted.
Correct.
And I think what is key to understand is that the rules are going to be strict for those that don't comply.
Right. And what are there any key takeaways from the implementation of tax frameworks in the Middle East region? I mean,
Yeah, so I would say let's learn from VAT. Many of you out there, the listeners, have experienced VAT. You know, you've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. We're a couple of years on now. What did you learn from that you could put and implement into going forward with corporate tax? First of all, obviously, it's about clear communication and education. I've mentioned that a couple of times. You need to be educated and know about the tax framework here. Number two is technology and infrastructure, and therefore having a software system that is going to support you with getting your numbers accurately so that you could even give that to the federal tax authorities when they come. And capacity building. It is about recruiting people who are knowledgeable, capable to be able to support your organization. So don't just think, oh, I just want to hire this bookkeeper, sasta hai, isko le lenge. You know, he'll do it or she'll do it. It doesn't work that way. You need to hire experienced people who understand this. If you don't, you will get yourself in a mess, and you will then end up paying fines and penalties, which is something you don't want to do. So why don't we just do it right from the beginning?
is there a possibility if, that you could also lose your license? Or could your license then be revoked if you fail to comply or you falter at several occasions?
Now, that is a question I haven't been asked before. So at that point, an accounting and finance professional says, I will have to go away and review that and come back to you. Isn't that an answer when we don't know the answer? Actually, jokes apart, I think it will be more about fines and penalties, but it could, if it is really severe, probably result in something like this. But I mean, I'd have to check.
Correct. But also, as we say that the entire UAE market is moving on from oil economy to non-oil economy, and now you've coming up with corporate tax, don't really see a good balance here in terms of, for example, you want to increase the business community and then introduction, of course, international guidelines as well. How much will this impact in terms of new businesses opening?
The UAE have been very careful in order to ensure that they are still going to be an attractive place for businesses. There are tax exemptions, there are tax reliefs. So if you read the 60-page documentation, the consultation document, there are going to be leniencies within that in order to support and ensure that the UAE has been so successful with so many companies setting up here, and they will ensure that nothing happens about that going forward as well. And hence why it's 9%. I mean, we're lucky it's 9%.
Right. And one subject that really, really surprises me is rather usage of this. It's 0% tax in comparison to tax-free. So you are 0% tax free in comparison to tax free. What does this even mean?
So there are some organizations, because of the nature of their trading, are either exempt from tax. Some are 0%, and then the rest are taxed, right? And that is a bit of better understanding on the nature of the business that they do in order to see in which tax bracket they fall.
Right, but I think it's a very clever usage of words out there. I mean,
But
you're not exempted.
It's been used historically within tax legislations, even in countries like India and the UK have used this sort of terminologies and it will continue to do so.
Perfect.
You know, as professionals, work has increased for many, and as you mentioned, that this is the great time for finance professionals as well. Any quick word of advice for all finance professionals listening to us right now?
If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So get ready, educate yourself, read the consultation document, understand what is required. If you don't know the answers, ask specialists and advisors in the area of tax. And if you're unsure, don't just go and do an entry or go do a calculation without checking it, because it could work against you and the organization. Use technology to your advantage, and ensure that you are complying to all the rules and regulations.
Superb.
Thank you so much, Fazeela. This was such an amazing session with you. And, the way you came on and you spoke about corporate tax at length, a bit of a bumpy ride out there with the kind of news that you brought in. But I'm hoping we don't get to that stage where, we still stick around to corporate tax at 9% for the next 10 to 20 years at least.
10 to 20 years. Oh, my goodness. Thank you ever so much for having me on your show today. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Tali.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
With Vivek Sanil and Muriel Desar. Talk 100.3.